Europa is an action puzzle platformer with a focus on story and not a lot of puzzling or platforming. It's the kind of game that tempts me to fall back on the classic story good, game bad dichotomy, but as usual, reality is a lot more complicated. When I review a game, I try not to put up a wall between the story, themes and atmosphere part of the game and the game part of the game. This would make my job as a reviewer simpler, but my job isn't to simplify. My review doesn't have to fit into 5 categories to rate 1 to 10. Gameplay gets a 4, but story gets an 8, so overall, Europa is a 6 out of 10. It's not 2005 anymore, that's not how we do things now. I like to think that my reviews and videos go even a little deeper than that. I don't care if a game has good music or if jumping around feels nice. Those things matter, but only if they help the whole game do what it's set out to do. Understanding what that thing is, why it works and why it doesn't, and whether it is something that it is worth making a game about in the first place. This is what a critic does. That's what I try to do. How much I succeed depends on the individual article and video, but I try. That said, Europa is seriously testing me. I really want to say that the story is kind of interesting, but the game isn't, and leave it at that. Instead, we're taking the long way around. I mean, kind of long, you've seen how long the video is. We're taking the long way around, in part because the story and the gameplay individually aren't that complicated, so there isn't a lot to talk about, and in part because it's only fair to take the game as it is, and as it will appear to you if you do play it. Europa is the name of the terraformed planet that the game takes place on. In a way, Europa is more important to the story than its protagonist or any other character. The planet, transformed by gardener robots from a dead moon into a place fit for life, represents the hope of humanity. A humanity that, fleeing from a dying Earth, believes to have learned from its past. At first, Europa looks like a paradise. Lush green forests and clean blue rivers. Wildlife thrives, organic and mechanical, with no predators in sight. It took me a while to realize that this planet, humanity's new home, has no people in it. You start the game in what you're told is the protagonist's house, which might just happen to be isolated from the rest of the community. The protagonist's father has gone away. You can probably guess what the game means by that, but he left a journal behind. And it's through this journal that we learn the story of this planet. The first few pages explain why Z, the protagonist, was brought on this planet, the role of the gardener robots, and the incoming colony ships. This is when the game is at its best. Platforming takes place over large fields, with few and forgiving challenges, all built around your limited flight ability. It's the only section of the game to consistently give you fuel for your jetpack and encouraging unlimited use of this power. The result is joyful in many ways. It goes well with the early game narrative, joyful in its own right, helped by the simple but tactile euphoria of flying over vast amounts of beautiful pastoral vistas. It's a joy that few platformer can sustain for any amount of time, and that's also true of Europa. This part of the game, the best part of the game, lasts about an hour. Soon the game slows down. Jetpack fuel becomes rare, while enemies and hazards that try to shut off your powers multiply. This is necessary, to some degree. Being able to fly over any puzzle and platforming challenge would make the challenges pointless. At the same time, the game just taught me how to fly. It can't expect me to go back to walking without feeling underwhelmed. But what if underwhelmed is how you should feel? You lose your powers right as the protagonist's father, which just minutes ago was so excited over the possibility offered by this new planet, becomes confused and then resentful over the behavior of his fellow humans. As soon as people got to this planet, they began to harvest resources from it. Their ships collide with the wildlife. Their mining operations are boycotted by the terraforming robots. Humans waste no time rebuilding their conflictual relationship with nature. This isn't the time for gleefully flying over a lush forest. This is the time for human-machine relationships. It's the time for puzzles. Europa, as I said in the beginning, is clearly focused on its story. The consistency with which everything is set to accompany the themes and the development of the story is laudable. I want to see more games like this, just not this one game in particular. The story is very simple, and the environmentalist theme is so streamlined that forcing the rest of the game to follow its development feels like torture. 4 hours of your life will be dedicated to reenacting a story that fails to interrogate the causes of anti-environmentalism, the way that human interests often collide with natural forces, or even that extracting resources from the planet is something we can't choose not to do. The problem is that you won't be reading about those things while you play a video game. The story and the game are really well connected. Again, I really like this. I think it's the best part of the game, but it also means that as humans and nature collide in the story, the source of energy that lets you fly around becomes more rare. Eventually, you'll be forced into the, I suppose, natural state of slowly walking uphill and solving annoying puzzles. I say all this as someone who considers herself an environmentalist, and not just because I don't want to die and I don't want to be drafted into the water wars, but because preserving and helping nature thrive is a value in and of itself. Europa seems like it genuinely cares about its message, but what it says isn't remotely interesting enough to justify every decision that comes with it. I want to say that this game could maybe work with children, but I doubt any kid would like a game this slow. All things considered, I don't think I would recommend Europa to anyone.
Something incredible has happened. It seems you have a relationship with that guardian, something deeper than I could have possibly imagined. Neither of you made a sound, but you understood.